7 years. That's how long I spent not knowing whether my wife was dead, alive, or simply gone because she chose to be. I still remember the exact moment I realized something was wrong. It was a Tuesday in late October, around 9 p.m. My wife, I'll call her Diana, was supposed to be back from her girls' weekend trip to Savannah by 7. She'd gone with her co-worker, a woman named Patrice, and 2 others I'd only met once at a company Christmas party. Diana had been looking forward to it for weeks. She'd packed Thursday night, laid her outfits on the bed, asked me twice if I'd remembered to buy the right cereal for our son Marcus, who was 12 at the time. She kissed me goodbye on Friday morning and said, "Don't let him eat pizza every night." I laughed. I said I wouldn't. That was the last thing she ever said to me. By 9 o'clock Tuesday, I'd called her phone 11 times. Every call went straight to voicemail. I told myself the battery had died. I told myself she'd lost her charger. I told myself 100 small, manageable things to keep the panic from taking hold. Marcus was already in bed, and I sat at the kitchen table in the quiet of our house in Raleigh, North Carolina, and I stared at the door and waited. She didn't come through it. I called Patrice at 9:45. There was a long pause before she answered. The kind of pause that means the person on the other end already knows what the call is about. She told me that Diana had left early. Saturday morning, she said. Diana told them she wasn't feeling well and wanted to drive back. They'd offered to come with her. She said no. She said she just wanted some quiet time alone in the car. Patrice sounded nervous. I noticed it, filed it away somewhere, and didn't fully understand it until much later. I called the Chatham County Sheriff's Office that night. They told me I needed to wait 24 hours. I didn't sleep. I sat on the couch with my phone in my hands and Marcus's soccer cleats by the front door, and I waited for a sound that never came. The next morning, I filed the report. What followed was the strangest, most disorienting chapter of my life. The investigators were professional and thorough, and for the first few weeks I genuinely believed, that Diana had simply been in an accident somewhere on I-95 or one of the smaller state roads she sometimes took when she wanted to avoid highway traffic. I believed there would be an explanation. A hospital, a foggy stretch of road, something that made sense. Instead, what they found was her car, parked at a rest stop outside of Fayetteville, about 90 miles from home. It had been there since Saturday. The keys were in the center console. Her phone was in the glove compartment, powered off. Her overnight bag was in the trunk, still packed, clothes still folded. There was no sign of a struggle, no sign of foul play. Diana had simply walked away from her car and disappeared. The detective assigned to our case, a quiet, steady man named Hargrove, sat down with me in my living room and asked me the kinds of questions I expected. Was our marriage stable? Had we argued recently? Was Diana under any unusual stress? Did she have any financial problems I didn't know about? I answered them all honestly. We were fine. We hadn't argued. She seemed tired lately, but nothing alarming. Our finances were solid. Then Hargrove asked me a question I wasn't expecting. "Mr. Calloway," he said, "are you familiar with a man named Scott Avery?" I told him I wasn't. He wrote something down without explaining further. He thanked me for my time and told me they were pursuing several leads. He shook my hand at the door and left, and I stood there in the hallway of my own house wondering why a stranger's name had just been dropped into the middle of a conversation about my missing wife. I found out 3 weeks later. Hargrove called me into the station. He said it professionally, carefully, the way people say things when they've rehearsed them. Scott Avery was a regional sales director at the firm where Diana worked. He and Diana had been, Hargrove used the word involved. He and Diana had been, Hargrove used the word involved. He said it had been ongoing for approximately 8 months. Scott Avery had come forward voluntarily when Diana was reported missing. He told them about the relationship. He said he hadn't heard from her since the Friday she left for Savannah, and that he was as confused as everyone else. I remember the fluorescent light in that room. I remember the water stain on the ceiling tile above Hargrove's head. I remember that my hands were completely still in my lap, which surprised me, because inside I felt like every organ in my body had just rearranged itself. 8 months. I drove home. I picked Marcus up from school like it was a normal Tuesday. I made spaghetti. I helped him with his history homework. I watched him fall asleep on the couch during the 10 o'clock news, and when the house was quiet, I went to the kitchen, and I sat there until 3 in the morning, just sitting. The way you do when your mind is processing something too large to hold all at once. The investigation continued for another several months. They never found Diana. They found no evidence of anything criminal. Scott Avery was looked at carefully. I won't pretend otherwise, and I won't pretend I didn't hope they'd find something on him. But he had an alibi for the weekend, verified by multiple people, and Hargrove eventually told me they had no basis to pursue him further. The case went cold. I won't try to compress 7 years into a few sentences because the truth is those years didn't compress. They stretched. They were long and slow and full of moments I wasn't prepared for. Marcus asking me at 13 whether his mother had left because of something he did. My mother-in-law, Eleanor, who alternated between grief and cold suspicion, sometimes looking at me across a dinner table like she was still trying to decide. Diana's older brother, Raymond, who called me twice a year on her birthday and on the anniversary, and who was the only person in her family who never once made me feel like a suspect. I leaned into work. I managed a regional distribution operation for a logistics company, and for a few years I threw myself into it completely, 60, 70 hours a week, because it was easier to be tired than to be alone. Marcus grew up faster than he should have. He became serious and self-sufficient in the way that children of absent parents sometimes do, filling in the empty spaces with responsibility. He made varsity soccer. He got a partial scholarship to NC State. He was and remains the best thing in my life. Diana's best friend, a woman named Carol, stayed close through all of it. She and Diana had been friends since college. They'd been roommates for 3 years at Chapel Hill, stood in each other's weddings, talked on the phone almost every week. Carol had been devastated by Diana's disappearance, genuinely devastated, and she'd been a steady presence for both Marcus and me in the years that followed. She checked in regularly. She sent Marcus birthday cards without fail every single year. She came to his high school graduation and sat with my mother in the second row and cried. There were times I wondered about Carol, not in a suspicious way. At least not at first, just in the quiet, meandering way your mind wanders when you've been alone long enough. She was warm and direct and funny in a dry way that I'd always appreciated. She'd never remarried after her own divorce years earlier. She said she hadn't found anyone worth the trouble. I never acted on any of it. Diana had been gone, not confirmed dead. I had no closure. It felt, in some fundamental way, like the wrong thing to do. Around the time Marcus turned 19, I finally did what my brother had been telling me to do for years, and went to see a therapist. Her name was Dr. Dyes. Finley, a small woman in her 60s who had an office full of plants and a very direct way of asking questions. She told me something in our third session that I've thought about many times since. She said that grief without a body and grief without an explanation are the hardest kinds because they leave a door open that you can never fully close. You spend years standing in the draft from that door. She was right. I filed for a declaration of presumed death when Marcus was 20. It was a legal formality more than anything, a way of cleaning up the paperwork of a life that had been in administrative limbo for almost 8 years. My attorney walked me through it. The court approved it, and on a rainy Thursday afternoon I walked out of the Wake County Courthouse with a document that said, officially, that Diana was gone. I didn't feel relieved. I didn't feel sad. I felt something I can only describe as hollow. Not empty exactly, but like a room that's been cleaned out and hasn't been furnished yet. That was in April. In June, Carol called me. She didn't lead with small talk, which was unlike her. She said my name twice. Calloway, James, which is what she called me when something was serious. She said she needed to see me in person. She said it wasn't something she could do over the phone. Her voice was steady, but there was something underneath it, some kind of weight she'd been carrying. And when I heard it, I felt that door in my chest swing open again. We met the following Saturday at a coffee place near her apartment in Durham. She was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table with a coffee she hadn't touched, and a plain white envelope in front of her on the table. She looked tired, not unhealthy. Carol had always been fit and sharp-looking, but tired in the way that people look when they've been holding something difficult for a long time, and the holding has worn them down. I sat across from her. I looked at the envelope. "What is this?" I said. She put her hands flat on the table. She said, "Diana mailed this to me. It came about 3 weeks after she disappeared. I've been carrying it ever since." I stared at her. "I know," Carol said. "I know, James. I've spent 7 years trying to decide what to do with it, and I've gotten it wrong every single time, and I'm sorry. I'm genuinely sorry. You deserved to have this years ago, and I didn't give it to you, and I'm not going to try to make that okay, because it isn't." Her eyes were wet. She slid the envelope across the table. I didn't pick it up immediately. I just looked at it. Diana's handwriting on the front, just my name, no address, because it had been sent to Carol to be held. It wasn't sealed anymore. Carol had read it, obviously. The flap was tucked in, not gummed shut. "Why didn't you give it to me?" I said. My voice came out quieter than I intended. "Because at first I thought it would destroy you," Carol said. "And then because I thought it would destroy Marcus. And then I just kept finding new reasons. I told myself I was protecting you. I think I was actually protecting myself from having to watch what it did to you. That's the truth." She paused. "I'm not asking you to forgive me today. I couldn't keep it anymore, not after the legal declaration. It felt like the last door and I couldn't let it close without you knowing." I picked up the envelope. I pulled out the letter. 3 pages, both sides of 2 of them, handwritten on the kind of plain white paper Diana used to keep by the phone in our kitchen. Her handwriting was neat and familiar, and for a moment just looking at it made it hard to breathe. The letter said this: she had found the lump herself, in January of that year. She hadn't told me. She'd gone to the doctor alone and then to the specialist alone, and when the results came back, stage 3 breast cancer, aggressive subtype, guarded prognosis, she had sat in her car in the parking garage of the medical building for 2 hours before she drove home. She wrote that she was terrified. Not of dying, she said, or not only of dying, but of what the treatment would look like. She had watched her father go through chemotherapy when she was in college. She had watched what it did to him, the way it hollowed him out, the way he became a different person, the way the person who came out the other side bore only a loose resemblance to the man she'd known. She said she couldn't do that to Marcus. Couldn't let him watch her become that. Couldn't do it to me. She wrote about Scott Avery. She said it plainly, without making excuses. She'd started something with him around the time of her diagnosis, though she hadn't told him about the cancer either. She said it was stupid and selfish, and she knew it. She said she thought, at the time, that it was a way of feeling alive when everything inside her felt like it was preparing to shut down. She wrote, "I know that's not an explanation. It's barely even a reason. But it's the truth, and you deserve the truth more than you deserve a version of it that makes me look less terrible." She wrote that she had spent the months between January and October trying to decide what to do, whether to fight, whether to tell me. She said she went back and forth 100 times. She said there were days she picked up the phone to call me and couldn't do it, couldn't find the words that would make the conversation real. The girl's trip to Savannah was real. That part was true. But she'd already made her decision by then. She wrote, "I know you'll be angry. You have every right. I know this isn't fair to you or to Marcus, and I'm not asking you to understand it, only to someday not hate me for it. I needed to go on my own terms. That's all I can say. I couldn't watch myself disappear slowly in a hospital bed with you holding my hand because it would have broken both of us, and I'm too selfish and too scared to go that way." Near the end of the letter, she wrote about Carol. She said she'd chosen Carol to hold the letter because Carol was the only one she trusted to read it, judge it fully, and eventually do the right thing with it, even if the right thing took time. And then, at the very bottom of the last page, in slightly different ink than the rest, like she'd come back to add it after she'd already finished, "Tell James that if he finds someone worth trusting, he should trust them. He's the best man I've ever known, and he deserved better than me. I mean that." I folded the letter and put it back in the envelope. Carol was watching me. She hadn't spoken since I started reading. "Did you know about the cancer?" I asked. "No," she said. "I had no idea. None. I swear to you." "Did you know about Scott Avery?" I suspected something. She'd been distant for a while. I didn't ask. I should have asked. I looked out the window at the parking lot. A woman was loading groceries into a minivan. A kid was pulling on her sleeve. The most ordinary scene in the world. "She mailed this to you 3 weeks after," I said. "Where did it come from?" "The postmark was Portland," Carol said quietly. "Oregon." I absorbed that. Diana had driven from a rest stop in Fayetteville, North Carolina to Portland, Oregon. She'd done it slowly, it seemed, or maybe she'd stopped somewhere in between. I would never know. "Is she still—" "I don't know," Carol said. "I genuinely don't know, James. There was no return address. I've never heard from her again. I don't know if she—" She stopped. "I don't know. The cancer. Stage 3. Aggressive. No treatment." I did the math the way I think anyone would. 7 years. With treatment, the numbers vary widely. Without it, for that subtype, Hargrove statistician probably would have given her 2, maybe 3 years at the outer edge. I think I already knew, sitting in that coffee shop, what I believed. I didn't say it out loud. Neither did Carol. We sat there for a long time. Long enough for the coffee shop to fill up and thin out again around us. Carol kept her hands flat on the table like she was ready to be held accountable for whatever I needed. I didn't yell at her. I thought about it. There was a moment about 20 minutes in where I felt something move through me that was close to fury. But it passed. She'd been wrong to keep the letter. She knew it. She'd said so. And she was here now, sitting across from me with red eyes and empty hands. And I thought about what Diana had written. I needed to go on my own terms. I thought about Marcus. He was 20 years old. He was at NC State studying environmental science and coaching kids soccer on weekends. He was healthy and whole and good, and some not insignificant part of that was because of how hard I'd worked to keep him that way while also keeping myself upright. I thought about what Marcus would want to know. That was the harder question. I called Raymond that evening. Diana's brother. I told him I'd received some information about Diana's disappearance and that I wanted to talk to him in person before I said anything to his mother. He was quiet for a moment, and then he said, "She's gone, isn't she?" Not a question. Just a man who had already arrived at the most likely truth and had been sitting with it for a long time. "I think so," I said. "Yes." He breathed out slowly. "Thank you for telling me, James," he said. "Thank you for calling me, James," he said. "Thank you for calling me first." The conversation with Marcus was the hardest one I've ever had. We sat on the back porch on a Sunday afternoon in July with glasses of iced tea that neither of us drank, and I told him everything. I gave him the letter. I watched him read it. I watched him read it. I watched his face move through things I couldn't name and some I recognized. When he finished, he sat quietly for a while. Then he said she was scared. "Yes," I said. "I think she was." "That doesn't make it okay." "No, it doesn't." He thought about it. He handed the letter back to me. "I don't want to hate her," he said, "but I might for a while." "That's okay," I said, "but I might for a while." "That's okay," I said. "That's allowed." He nodded. He picked up his iced tea and looked at the backyard, at the oak tree we planted when he was 4, which was now enormous. "Are you okay, Dad?" I thought about the honest answer to that. "I will be," I said. "I really think I will." It's been 2 years since that afternoon on the porch. I found a therapist I trust, a good one this time. And I've done the work that I probably should have started years earlier. Marcus graduated in the spring and took a position with a conservation nonprofit in Asheville. He visits most weekends and still coaches soccer and calls me every Sunday morning without fail. Carol and I still have coffee, still talk. Things shifted between us after that day at the corner table. Not dramatically, not overnight, but steadily, the way tides move. We both noticed it. We've been careful and patient and honest in a way that I haven't been with another person in a very long time. Whatever it is, it feels nothing like a consolation prize. It feels like something that had its own roots, separate from everything else, and just needed the ground to clear. I don't know how to end this story neatly, because it doesn't end neatly. Diana is somewhere out there, or she isn't. She was frightened, and she was flawed, and she loved Marcus in the way she was capable of loving him. I spent a long time being angry at her, and more time being sad, and now I find myself mostly just at peace with the complexity of it. People do not fit easily into the categories we want to put them in. Even the people who hurt us. The letter is in a locked box in my bedroom closet. Marcus knows where it is. Someday, when he's ready, I think he'll want to read it again. And someday, not yet, but someday, I think he'll arrive at the same complicated place I've arrived at. Not forgiveness, exactly. Not anger anymore either. Something in between that doesn't have a clean name, but that feels finally like solid ground.